everybody. Can you hear me at home? Excellent. Welcome. This is a new addition to our original Rev Up series by popular demand, and it was just some CMA tips and tricks. I know this is a struggle for many agents because it involves math, and math is clearly not our strong suit unless we're calculating our commission. But that being said, I want to go ahead and preface this class with just kind of a basic understanding that so many adjustments, much of our value is very subjective, which I understand makes this a little bit challenging. So all we can do is operate off of the numbers that are available to us and really research our markets thoroughly so that we understand why something is worth what it's worth in our particular neighborhoods. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So your quote of the day, I know I've been a little nicer lately. I started off much more harsh. Motivation is what gets you started. Habit is what keeps you going. And we know this. That motivation starts waning real fast. That's why I started with the poll. The majority of you are not doing your savers daily. Fine. But ultimately, you probably started doing them and then it just didn't become a habit for you. So what you need to get started with any CMA, the property address, of course, and then an overview of property features. So bare minimum, we need square footage, number of bedrooms and bathrooms, does it have a pool or not, how many garage stalls or does it have a garage, is there solar, if so, is it owned, if it's owned, is it owned outright or is there an assumable loan on it, what is the lot size, what are the views, what is the age, and was any recent remodeling done? Certainly you can ask these questions over the phone when you are talking to your prospective seller. But if possible, I've even asked them to send me photos if we had a really fast turnaround time on our meeting, or I asked for the opportunity to preview their property in advance of doing anything else. So before we sit down and discuss the listing agreement, before we sit down and discuss obviously pricing, I want to have the opportunity to see what I'm up against as far as what our list price, at least our list range, should likely be. This can come back and bite you. I've mentioned this story on my listing class, and I'll probably forget that I shared it today, and I'll share it again next week. But I had a situation where I was talking to the seller and just asking for a rundown of some of the things that they had done. And I, in a very broad scope fashion, asked if they had updated anything in their home. Now, in my mind, when I reference updates or remodeling, it's, yeah, we redid the kitchen, we redid some bathrooms, we added a pool, things of that sort. Over the phone, when I just asked that vague question, the response was, oh my gosh, yes, we have updated everything. So I got to the property, and the updates that they were talking about were not the updates that Leah was talking about. They updated their roof, their HVAC system, their wiring throughout the house. They spent tens of thousands of dollars doing these things. And all of the interior features were the same old 1970s floors, cabinets, appliances, everything. So I went into that and had to really quickly backpedal on what my discussion about value was going to be because I was under a false assumption that we were talking about the same types of upgrades. So please just be clear in that. And this is why I think previewing the property in advance or asking for those photos can be hugely beneficial. So that way you're not having to backpedal just on the spot to help them figure out pricing wise where they should be. So there was an old rule for comps, and it was the 3-3-1 rule. I made a snarky little comment about currently it's the 3-12-1/2 rule, but it's 3 sold within the last 3 months and located within a 1-mile radius. Right now, based on market conditions and just many of the differences between subdivisions, even if they're somewhat in close proximity to one another, I think that your better comps may be 3 solds within the last 12 months, okay, depending on your area. Most of the subdivisions have been pretty stagnant on price, meaning there probably won't be a significant difference from a year ago to today. If you can find 3 that sold within the last 6 months, even better. And then within half a mile. This, you may have to go further out, I understand that, But the reason I say half a mile is because typically that will keep you within the same subdivision unless they're right on the cusp or the outlying street for the subdivision. What you want to avoid at all costs is crossing major roads, because crossing major roads can be a big difference. Here in Goodyear, we have a family community, and right across the street, we have an active adult community. What do you think is going to sell for more on average for smaller homes? The active adult community. So if somebody were to pull up everything that has sold within a mile radius and it's pulling from that adult community, it's going to throw their numbers totally out of whack. So try to get like for like. Obviously, the moral to that story is do not compare adult community homes to single family communities, because it's just not going to be an effective measurement. Start in monsoon, which is going away, or curb view, which if you haven't already had a preview of that, you can explore it on Armless right now. My office, Goodyear, we are actually having a representative from Armless come out at our next team meeting, and she is going to do a full-on tutorial of how to utilize all of the aspects of curb view. So be ready for that. Then verify info in the MLS. Okay, so one thing that I just thought of as I was sitting here that I didn't account for is adjustments for closing cost concessions or something similar. While an appraiser will do that, I typically wouldn't modify my list price because of concessions, but I would want to know that I need to warn my sellers that concessions are very common in this area, and at this price, expect to pay them. But that kind of information you won't find in tax records. Okay, you won't find that in monsoon or curb view. We have to go into the details of the sale in the MLS. I also, while it's a good starting point to just get a sense of, okay, what has sold and when, the MLS will have photos. It'll have more of a description. So again, in just helping me decide what I'm up against and how to start making those adjustments, whatever 3 comps I land on, I will have read every description. I will have looked at every photo. If there's a virtual tour, I have watched the virtual tour. In an ideal world, I'm working in my designated neighborhood. So there's a chance that I saw this home in person. I previewed it while it was still active. So that way I have even more inherent knowledge for what those differences might be between that one and my prospective listing. I know many of you like to use these because they're pretty, and that's fine, but just understand that your RPR and your Cloud CMA, they're not intended for accurate pricing portrayal. They really are just one step above a Zillow's estimate, because they're utilizing the same general algorithm for finding comps. Now, the good thing about the RPR and the Cloud CMA is that you can go in and you can tell it, don't include these comps. You can make adjustments. But the problem is that baseline is starting the same. And I don't like how it shows to a prospective seller, because it has a big red negative number that shows what those adjustments were, especially if they're downward adjustments. And so I think you just kind of put things on the wrong, you set them off on the wrong foot when you're trying to convey value to your prospective seller, and all they see is that you think their house is a piece of crap and you've made all these adjustments, and it's right there in big bold numbers on the front page. So yes, you can utilize those, but at the end of the day, you're just using the MLS is always going to be your best way to determine value. So a few things we need to know. I only start with 3 components. Okay, so when I'm going to look for comps, I'm not adding in all of the features to try to get an identical match, because especially in this market where we don't have that many sales, you're probably going to struggle to get some comps even just doing these 3. Square footage. I will generally do 10% on either side. So if it's a 2,500 square foot home, I'll go up to 2,750 and down to 2,250. If I have to, I could expand that range, because adjusting for square footage is a pretty simple adjustment. But that's my starting point. So 10% on either side. Area, subdivision. Again, you can go outside the subdivision if you absolutely have to, but I would take a smaller or larger home within my same subdivision, as opposed to finding a similarly sized home outside of my subdivision. And then close of escrow, we just discussed the 331 or the 312 half, but 6 months is typically a pretty good starting point. So when I'm running comps, those are literally the only three aspects that I am initially putting into my search. And I'm hoping to come up with 3 sales. That leads us to our next point. Focus on solds. I don't know who taught a class at some point that told you all to look at actives, but that is the worst case scenario that you could put here, especially right now where you see that these homes aren't selling because they're listed too high. So why would you want to add your prospective listing into that mix of unsellable homes? Pending and UCB can help determine your market conditions and trajectory, meaning if all of your UCBs and pendings are higher than the most recent solds, there's a possibility that that particular neighborhood is going to have a positive adjustment for market conditions. Most of them are not right now. Most of them are either stagnant or they're actually losing a little bit of value. The luxury market is an anomaly to that, but generally speaking, that's just kind of what we're operating with. So you want 3 solds, not actives, not pendings, not UCBs, not CCBS. 3 solds is what we're focused on. And then you need to learn how to calculate adjustments. I'm going to give you some rough estimates and ideas today. That's going to be the core part of this class. But if you really want to know how to figure out an appropriate adjustment for any feature in a community, there's only one way to do that. And it's pull up your median and average sales prices for everything that has that feature and pull up your median and average sales prices for everything that does not have that feature. And then what is the difference? The potential problem with that is what if other features came into play? So I understand that that's not a universal option for handling this, but that's why knowing your market really well, exploring and going into each of those homes can be hugely beneficial. But I'll give you, like I said, some rough numbers, but a pool could be worth a lot more in one neighborhood than it can be in another. So you just have to kind of figure out what is that pool worth. And the only way to do that is by researching the actual numbers of the sales. No single adjustment. This is actually an appraiser guideline. Many of these are appraiser guidelines. So I'm trying to save you from 2 things. 1, mispricing up front, but 2, bumping into an appraisal issue down the road. So no single adjustment should account for more than 10% of the list or sales price. So if you have a $600,000 house and they spent $100,000 on their pool, what is the max that they can get for their pool on an appraisal? 60 grand. Doesn't matter how much they spent. Doesn't matter if they just spent it. 60 grand with very few exceptions. A pool is a really good example because pool costs have gone up. And people do some crazy stuff in their backyards, like lazy rivers. So just know that going in, that whatever they spent isn't necessarily, well, certainly it's not going to be the ROI that they can expect. So just try to keep that idea in mind. This goes for any remodeling that they've done, that even if they spent $75,000 on the kitchen, if it was a $60,000 or a $60,000 limit because of that 10%, then that's what we need to operate off of. Do not, if you take nothing else away from the class today, please remember this. Do not use price per square foot. Period. There are no exceptions to this. Do not use it. Smaller single-story homes will always sell for more than larger 2-story homes. And part of this is just building costs. It costs more to build out than it does to build up. But adding extra space onto a house doesn't necessarily increase the value by any stretch. So larger homes, like I said, they're always going to sell for less price per square foot. So please do not use that. I will give you a very specific formula that will help you, and it is the one, again, that appraisers most often use. So a few basic adjustments. If your home, your prospective listing, has an additional bedroom than the other comps that you have found, you're going to get between $3,000 and $5,000 per bedroom on average. Again, that can change, and I'll give you a real good example. If you are in a neighborhood that is comprised predominantly of 3 and 4 bedroom homes, 3 and 4, those two are the most critical difference. Like 1 to 2, you're probably in adult communities. Once you start getting over 4, then it's like, okay, those are nice, but maybe not critical to the average consumer, the average buyer. But that 3 to 4 in most family communities, those are probably going to be a $10,000 to $15,000 upgrade if you go from a 3-bedroom to a 4-bedroom house. That's the only exception. Everything else, you're looking at roughly $3,000 to $5,000 per bedroom. But this is another one where you can pull up, what did all of the 3-bedroom homes sell for? What did all of the 4-bedroom homes sell for? Even if they are very similarly sized from a square footage perspective, that's going to be the difference. An office with den with the option to convert to a bedroom, okay, which just means that it doesn't have a closet. Same thing, you're actually going to get credit for that. So if another home doesn't have that den that has the option to convert to a bedroom, then you can increase your value by about $3,000 to $5,000, except in a retirement community. So I know a lot of these are going to be a little one-off if you are working the active adult community. There's no adjustment for additional bedrooms. They do not care. Generally speaking, the 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and an open space is what most of our active adult communities are going to focus on. If you do work in those communities, I would know my floor plans really well, because what they do sell, and it's wild to me, the difference in value based on floor plan. The number of bedrooms and bathrooms can be the same, and the square footage can be very similar, but certain floor plans just hold a much higher appeal in active adult communities than others. So if you know that difference, you'll be able to make adjustments based on those as well. Baths. A half bath is going to add about $2,000 to $3,000 for you. 3/4 to a full bath, you've probably noticed we don't even do 3/4 of a bath anymore. And the reason for that is because in the wake of these super showers, that's considered a full bathing situation. So they're no longer making any deductions if you have a bathtub or not in that, especially in your primary suite. So whether it's a big shower, it's a shower and a tub combo, whatever that is, you're looking at $10,000 if there's an additional full bathroom by comparison to the comps. You may not have known this, so I kind of briefly referenced this, but updates to a kitchen or bathroom will often yield 100% of the ROI, assuming it's vastly superior. Like if they just did a kitchen remodel to bring it up to the standard in the community, then you're not making adjustments, right? This is, hey, they took it, everybody else has Formica countertops and linoleum flooring and white appliances, and this one has quartz and a higher grade hickory cabinet and the solid wood floors, those types of things. If you're doing those, they need receipts, but those will often, and again, this is an appraisal perspective, those will often yield 100%. Again, keeping that 10% limit in mind. So if they really went overboard, they over improved for the neighborhood is what that typically means, and they're not going to get all of their money back. But if they spent $12,000 on a full bath remodel, they're probably going to get their $12,000 back. So again, this is why you need to know, what are we comparing it to? Look really closely at those 3 comps that we've pulled so we can start making these adjustments. A pool. I suspect that this will continue to change. Right now, pools will be given somewhere between $25,000 and $60,000 in value, just based on what I've been seeing, with $40,000 being the average. That's a pretty average pool. So just to be clear, that is really no water features. It's not a connected spa. It's not all of the travertine surrounds. It's going to be a pretty basic pool. Diving pool versus play pool, no difference. What they're looking at is going to be the size, and then is it some giant sheer descent waterfall type feature, or is it just a little rock in the corner? So that's going to be ultimately what makes the difference. Turning a 1-story home into a 2-story home. I have heard some appraisers in the past say that they don't change value for this, or they don't make an adjustment for that. Yeah, I'd be teaching them real fast that they better re-review their appraisal guidelines, because that's ridiculous. Single-story homes, like I said, they cost more to build. They absolutely are worth more than a 2-story home that's a similar size. The only time I could see them making that claim is if legitimately they can back it up with numbers. If they can show me in this exact neighborhood that 2-story homes are selling for exactly the same amount as single-story homes that are similarly sized, I would buy that. But ultimately, I've done my own research and I know that. However, what you should be doing is calculating the median sales price for each. Take your 1 story median price minus your 2 story median price, and that what that equals is the dollar amount to adjust from a comp. Again, depending on size, depending on neighborhood, this could be $5,000. This could be $15,000. So it could fall anywhere in between. And then I made a little note, you can use that same calculation process for market conditions. So if you look up what were the median sales prices in, or what was the median sales price in this subdivision 7 to 12 months ago versus what is the median sales price in this subdivision for the last 3 months, that dollar amount, that difference, will be what you can apply for market condition changes. Value for square footage. Okay, I told you that there was a specific formula to follow, and it is not 100% of the square footage or price can be utilized. So the average, you're going to average the price per square foot for the neighborhood from the past year, which you can do with a real quick CMA. It'll break that down for you. Then you multiply that average by 25%. Okay, so they're going to get 1/4 of that amount. And the result is the price per square foot that you can add or subtract from a comp for that adjustment. So let's use real numbers. The average price per square foot in the subdivision is $100. How many dollars can you use in your adjustment per square foot? 25. So if the average price per square foot in the neighborhood is 100, then you're looking at the 25% of that. So it's going to be $25 per square foot. So now if your property, one of your comps, is 100 square feet larger, we're going to take the $25 per square foot and multiply that by 100 square feet. And now that adjustment is $2,500. It is not $10,000. Do you see where this could become a big issue? Especially if we're doing, realistically, we're at $200 to $300 a square foot, and we're looking at a 400 to 600 square foot difference in the size of the home. You're going to be way outside the realm of possibility. So a quarter, you're taking 1/4 of whatever that price per square foot is, and that's what you're applying to the difference. I see some blank stares. Does anybody have a question about that before I move on? Are the blank stares because we're like, holy shit, we've been doing this wrong the whole time? No wonder my listings aren't selling because I thought it was worth $45,000 more than it actually was just based on size. It's fine. You're not alone. Which, ironically enough, and this is why I warn people against those third-party valuations. Many of them, your Zillows, your Redfins, even our RPR to some degree, they're not making individual adjustments like we're talking about here. They're using a price per square foot analysis. Well, that's where problems start to come in. And even if they do adjust it slightly, if they're using a price per square foot that's encompassing my active adult community that's less than a quarter of a mile away from me, it's automatically going to throw off my numbers. So that's why there's usually such a big disparity between what we're pulling and what some of those third-party sites are pulling.
Hey, Leah, I have a question.
Sure.
I thought I may have been mistaken, but I thought you said in the previous slide not to use price per square foot.
Correct. Do not use price per square, meaning if the price per square foot is $100, don't use that as your baseline for making an adjustment. When you're accounting for square footage, and I see where the confusion is coming in. I'm not using the $100 in my example. I'm using $25 to make those adjustments because you have to adjust for size in some way, and this is the formula for doing it. What I don't want is, in our example, the adjustment to the comps should have only been $2,500. Don't use price per square foot, meaning that you're calculating it at $10,000. Does that make
Oh,
sense?
okay. So the previous slide that you had that said don't use price per square foot in your calculations meant don't use what you see the whole calculation price per square foot straight up.
Correct.
You
Yep,
use the
exactly.
25% rule.
Exactly. Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Of course. Anybody else? All right, your casitas and attached living spaces, which ultimately could also be detached living spaces, meaning like a guest home. Generally speaking, and you'll want to verify, your square footage is not counted if it is detached, meaning it's not attached to the main house in any way. This is not 100% accurate, so this is why it involves doing a little research by pulling up the county records and going and actually seeing the house sketch. Does it look like that additional space was added or not? Monsoon broke it down, and I honestly, guys, I don't know how CurbView is going to do this. Monsoon broke it down where it would say added detached, or so that way you kind of knew what that extra size might be, but it wasn't included in the actual square footage. I'm not going to argue over the semantics of this. If ultimately you want to include all of that in the square footage that you're putting in the MLS, that's fine. You just have to obviously have evidence of where those numbers came from. But from a value perspective, just know this is what I want you to understand. From a value perspective, if it is an attached casita, okay, meaning that yes, it has its own little kitchenette or something similar, but in essence, you're walking down a hallway, you're opening up a separate door, and it's serving as like a bedroom. Even if you have to go outside a little bit, but it's connected to the house itself, that is going to be your just your price per not price per square foot, but your value for square footage analysis. That's you're going to include it all. So we're not separately adjusting for a casita. If it's a completely detached casita or guest home, then that's when we're going to look at what is that actual detached casita worth. I'm going to show you an example in my neighborhood. It's worth about $50,000. So it has nothing to do with the square footage of the house. I will tell you right now, a home that has less square footage than mine and all other similar features could potentially sell for more because of the value of that casita. So again, casitas and guest homes operate off of their own little numbers. So it is separate from just calculating, utilizing that 25% formula for square footage. Especially if you're looking at newer communities, do not trust a builder's square footage numbers. They so often they converted a garage into a bonus room or vice versa, or there was an addition where you could increase the size of your primary suite by tacking on some additional space. There was something that transpired if you maneuvered this room over here. There's a very good chance that those numbers are incorrect. And those are the folks who are reporting it to the county, which means that the county numbers could also be incorrect. So if you're walking it or you're doing kind of a comparison and the numbers just don't seem to be jiving, another good reason to see the house in advance, maybe ask that they have it measured. Some appraisers will come out and measure for 100 or 150 bucks, and then you'll have an actual solid number to work with for the size of the house. Location features. This one might be a little shocking for some of you. So there's no real adjustments made for corner versus interior lots. It might be a perk, it might be an incentive to a prospective buyer, but it's not actually worth anything extra if you're on a corner lot as opposed to an interior lot. A general rule of thumb, it's better to back onto something bad than to front it. And obviously that's just logical, right? Because it's harder to build a barricade. I can increase the size of my wall potentially to block whatever's behind me. I can't do that in the front of my home. A bad front, you can lose about 10% of your home value just for facing something undesirable. And that could be industrial property. It could be that your home is in an HOA area and all of a sudden across the street, it's not. And the lovely gentleman across the street has a million political flags as well as 24 different vehicles all parked on the lawn and his front driveway and everywhere else. That would automatically lose our poor sellers some pretty significant value. So just know that a bad back, you're losing 2 to 3%, and it's typically noise related. Again, that might be a little different. So if there are power lines immediately behind, and God, I hope not, but if those are, you're probably looking at more of like the 6 to 7% value loss, if not more. There's a lot of other concerns that come with something like that. A good front, you're in a cul-de-sac, you're facing a community area or a park, or the mountain is in front of you. those you're looking to add about 5% more to your value. And a good back also add 5% more. There are certain situations, again, in different communities where a golf course view can be worth a lot of money. So this is where you need to do your research, because while it's still supposed to be within that 10% range, I'm telling you right now, I have seen $600,000 and $700,000 homes that had a $150,000 golf course lot premium on them, and people were happy to pay that all day long based on where specifically it was on the green. So just know again that this is going to rely on some research on your part, but generally speaking, a good backyard is going to add about 5% over the comps. The property condition or determination of a nice view, and again, this is where it's not all black and white, right? It's 100% subjective. I might like my view of the community park right out my front door. Others may not. Others may not want to see their neighbors out there. They may not want the extra noise from the kids. Those may not be highly desired items for some prospective buyers. This is why it's subjective. Same thing goes with property condition. While there's not necessarily a designated number for all of the other, hey, this one does have nicer flooring. This one didn't have red, orange, and green paint everywhere. It was just very neutrally painted. It doesn't add value, not necessarily in a traditional percentage or dollar amount perspective, but it makes it more enticing to a prospective buyer to have some of those things, which then increases your likelihood of selling closer to or at your list price. So some things just add an inherent benefit, not an actual dollar for dollar benefit. Lot size. I do get asked about this one pretty frequently. So if the lot size is greater than 50% of its neighbors, you'll add about $1 to $2 per square foot for the difference. But if it's not greater than 50%, there's no adjustments. So just because their lot is 1,000 square feet larger than their neighbors, that doesn't mean that they're going to have any additional value added. Now, if the average size in the community is a 6,000 square foot lot, okay, and their lot size is a 10,000 square foot lot, there's absolutely value there. So that value is going to be that $1 to $2 per square foot for that 4,000 square foot difference. Okay, so you're looking at anywhere from $4,000 to $8,000. It's probably going to be in the 5 to 6 range in most cases for that lot size difference.
Haley, I have another question.
Sure.
So the top part there, location features about view and this, that, and the other, is that actually something that an appraiser takes into account? Or is that more of, like you said, subjective to the buyer who's more willing to, you know, entertain the value of paying for that when they're putting their offer in?
Yeah, so it's both. So an appraiser will absolutely make adjustments for your views, front and back, your property location. But how much are some of those things worth? That is maybe a little more of a subjective opinion. The appraiser will assign a dollar amount to it, but the buyer may have been willing to spend a lot more than what the appraiser is determining that golf course view is worth.
Okay, great. Yeah, because the golf course view makes sense, but like the neighbor with the political signs and the cars and stuff like that, I couldn't see an adjuster caring about that.
Oh yeah, they'll do it. We've actually seen it, and it doesn't go out just to say what it is. It'll just be like neighborhood deficiency or something more polite than what that is. But yeah, based on the circumstances, and really in that case, Jason, it was more a matter of, hey, we're facing a non-HOA community that just doesn't have as desirable of views. So they'll just indicate neighborhood views, and then they'll make a negative adjustment for it.
Okay, that makes sense. More sense. Cool, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Solar. Okay, if it's leased, 0%. Even if it's fully prepaid, it adds no value to the home whatsoever. Why? Because it's personal property. Okay, so we're not adding any value for leased solar. If it's owned outright, then we will typically add somewhere between 7,500 and 13,000 is what I'm most often seeing and hearing on appraisals. So I guess we're kind of operating with that. Understanding that, of course, these solar loans probably owe 30 plus thousand on them, which means that they're definitely not going to get back what they've put into it. And there's a lot of other factors that go into this. So the size, the age, the output of the panels, there's other things that can be accounted for, but unless you have a green appraiser, somebody who specializes in solar, which if you have a solar listing, I would recommend you request that when the time comes. Generally speaking, this is what you can come to expect just across the board. Solar can be a major detriment, a major detriment. And I know I didn't account for it here, but especially leased solar, there is a good chance that you will lose value on your home just because the buyers don't want to take over the lease. Again, I don't have a specific dollar amount. All I can tell you is it's not a desirable situation for many buyers. Equally undesirable, if not more so, is a solar loan that they have to assume. Because now, in essence, you just ask them to assume a second mortgage on the property when they're trying to buy a new house. And some of these, like I said, are quite substantial. Yes, if owned outright, that's the only time that you'll get a little bit of value for that. Your fireplaces, honestly, guys, I feel like these are worth nothing in Arizona. But I think it's more for decorative purposes than for utility. So if you have an indoor, outdoor, or built-in fire pit, that's just a nice looking setup that's either enhancing your backyard or it's enhancing some area in your house, you'll get roughly $1,000 to $2,000 per fireplace. Again, this is more an appraiser number, not necessarily it adds any value to the home itself or to prospective buyers. Now, that being said, I love the look of a fireplace. So would I be willing to pay an extra $1,000 to have that in an otherwise bland family room? Yeah, probably. Your garages, it's roughly $5,000 per space. So if you have a 3-car garage and they're all regular stalls going across the house, it's about $15,000 over a house that wouldn't have any spaces. Unlikely, right? It could happen, but I seriously doubt you're going to be in too many neighborhoods unless it's custom, where you have somebody with a 3-car garage next to somebody with no garage spaces. So really what we're looking at is the difference between a 2 and a 3-car garage and a 3 and a 4-car garage. That's where those $5,000 per space come in. A carport, you're typically going to get about $2,000 per space against somebody who has nothing there. Your tandem, or that should say golf cart, not gold cart. Apparently, I have wrong things on the mind. A golf cart garage space, it's about $2,500 per space. So if you are comparing a 3-car tandem garage to a 3-car full straight across garage, there is going to be a difference for having all 3 individual stalls as opposed to the tandem space. So just make sure that you're adjusting accordingly. Which makes sense, right? Because if you actually have to utilize all 3 spaces, it's a pain in the ass to try. Somebody needs to back up so you can pull in so that you can do it again in the morning, and then somebody has to move around. I did it. I did it for 3 years with my son. So I know the 3rd garage space is extremely valuable in that situation. Here is the part that a lot of folks do not understand. New windows, a new roof, all new plumbing, a new HVAC system, electrical upgrades, any of those types of things, there's no adjustment. None. Again, these might be benefits to a prospective buyer, but these are considered general home maintenance items. They're not going to give you. So my poor people that I told you, they updated everything in the house. Guys, this was a $240,000 house, just to go back in time a little bit. They put a $14,000 HVAC system on there. Well, what? Why? Especially when there were only 2 of them living there. Because some cute guy probably stopped by and sold them on why they needed this system, just like how solar works, and it's totally unnecessary. They were not going to see a dollar of that $14,000 that they invested just in that HVAC system. So please make sure your sellers understand that while, yes, these can be inherent benefits to a buyer, they are not going to increase the value of their home. I shared this at my last team meeting, but if you're still having some difficulty with adjustments, I've created an AI prompt that did a pretty darn good job when I put it in. It's not flawless. You'll probably have to do some tweaking, but ultimately it says, hey, act like I'll use mine, Sunset Terrace real estate expert. Create a comparative market analysis for the property located at 13718 West Weaver Court. Use the following property specs. Then you're going to input 3,749 square feet, 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, yes to a pool, above average upgrades, anything that you can add to it, define and describe the property. To determine current market value, find 3 similar properties within the same subdivision that have sold within the last 12 months. Based on the specs provided, make positive or negative adjustments for different property features that make the subject property inferior or superior to the 3 comparable properties. These adjustments may include size, number of bedrooms, number of garage stalls, overall condition, date of sale, and whether the property has a pool or not. Do not hallucinate. What this is good for isn't necessarily even coming up with your specific value. Okay, it'll give you a pretty good range. What I liked about this is it showed you the adjustments that it gave based on those features. So if you're still having difficulty kind of factoring in or determining what certain things might be worth in a neighborhood, this little prompt did a pretty good job of breaking that down. So again, I'll send all this out so you'll have all of this, but it's just something you can play with. So this is the RPR report. As you can tell, my neighborhood has been done for 8 years. So clearly it's still utilizing old Google shots, which isn't the end of the world. My home has never been on the MLS, so it couldn't pull any historical MLS data to feed into it. And it gave kind of a general range. It's like, hey, this is what it closed for way back in 2018. This is what our range is, 857 to 1.01 million. The month change is up positively. However, the year change for this area, so that's another good place to check just to see what is the market actually doing. And year over year, it's down 4.6%. Realistically, not just my subdivision, but I would say within that mile radius. So something to account for and something to consider when we're looking at price adjustments. Even if it gives you a 5-star confidence rating, you still need to verify the information as I'm about to show you. What I do like about RPR is, aside from the branding aspect, and you can do quite a bit with it, it's a very pretty report. I just don't love that if you start making adjustments, this starts to look weird and it just draws their attention to things that may not be necessary. This is his estimate. Okay, so we went from an RPR 932 to his estimate of just over $1 million. Not as outrageous as it might sound, but ultimately, that's a pretty big difference for a lot of sellers. That's a decent chunk right there. Also notice, however, that they do not have, this is not the correct square footage. So this is why we have to look at all of these things and verify information. This is the new curb view. And like I said, I haven't done much with this. I used to really like Monsoon for running quick comps because I could just go in there. I could tell it, hey, only go within a mile radius, half a mile radius, a quarter of a mile radius. Adjust for pools, yes or no. Go square footage, 10%, 15%, 17%. Sold within the last 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. I could make all of those real quick drop down adjustments and it would shoot out a report, which was really helpful, like when we're out going showing homes, that I could just have a quick comp report attached. We discussed this last week. Remember I said, hey, have a 1-page quick comp report attached to your showing sheets when you're out showing homes. And it's just to give the buyers an idea of the value range for a specific property. So this is Curb View's edition of that. I haven't mastered all of the ways to edit and tweak some of these, but you can see the distance is a quarter mile, the date is 6 months, and then I didn't even mess with square footage because I knew it wasn't going to pull anything too out of the ordinary. But then it shows what's currently for sale and what's for sale by square footage versus what the sold average is and what the sold value by square footage is. But look at these ranges. $623,000 to over $1 million. That's a very, very broad range. The sold average, 833 to 974.5. That's definitely closer, so we're looking better. Another reason why we're going to try to avoid this square footage, we're just looking at the sold average based on the comps that you selected. So now we're down to 903. Okay, so RPR said 932. Zestimate is saying just over $1 million, and now CurveView is showing 903,750. So what gives? Again, this is why those adjustments are so critical. This is why you need to do an actual CMA. So this is one that I put together in the MLS itself. It's the full CMA process, and I'll show you where to go to do that. I selected the properties that were sold, three of them, closest to me, most recent, most similar in size and features. One of these is a bit larger, and I made an adjustment accordingly. I confirmed all of my data to make sure that it was correct. Another reason why you need to physically see parts of the property so that you know, or at least ask the right questions, because you need to know, am I comparing a 4-bedroom house to a 3-bedroom house? This information is not necessarily available in public records, so you have to ask the questions. And then I'm going to break it all down. So this pulled information from the MLS, and then I made the adjustments accordingly. So this one that sold for $833, it sold in September of last year after being on the market for 57 days. One thing I didn't adjust for here, but I potentially could have, was going to be market conditions and market timing. This most recent one on 5/12/2012, or more recent one on 5/12/2026, this is my best comp because it's literally around the corner from me. It did have a pool. It's similarly sized, similar lot size, similar interior upgrades, but I still made some of the adjustments. So the square footage adjustment, again, I used my 25% calculation, is 16,950, give or take. I just kind of rounded up. When you are making adjustments, a quick note, the numbers, whether it's positive or negative, you are adjusting your subject property. You are not adjusting the comp. So the reason that it's plus 16,950 is because my home, my subject property, is larger. So I'm adjusting the comp average upward because my home is larger. Then you look at casita. I'm adjusting my subject property by a negative $50,000 because they have a casita and I do not. I have a cul-de-sac lot that I had to petition the president of Richmond American to give me because they were going to refuse to release it when I wanted it. And so I've adjusted $20,000 positively for me because this other Bloomington is an interior lot. Okay, they don't view anything outside in either back or front. So these are all the different things to account for. This particular sale, this harvest one, and this is another thing to watch out for. This is the weirdest anomaly I've ever seen in my neighborhood. Against all odds and reason, and I'm hesitant to say this because it was a Realty One Group listing, it sold for $990. This house is absolutely not worth $990. This is a larger 2-story house, and while it was very nicely upgraded, it's on a smaller lot. It's in a cheaper section of the subdivision. It did not have a pool, and it had a tandem garage, and it sold for $990. This, by all accounts, this house should have sold in the low eights, just based on my knowledge of the neighborhood. But they found just that right buyer. They wanted the 6 bedrooms, the 5 bathrooms. It was sold to a church. What they're going to do with it, I don't know. But those are the kinds of things that I need to know when I start making my adjustments, because I'm going to have to explain why this one sold for so much more than it should have, despite the adjustments that were made. So I made a 20,000 or a 28,000 negative adjustment here for the square footage because it is a bit larger. Again, it didn't have a pool. Mine does. I added the $50,000 there. I'm a single story. This is a 2-story. So that was roughly a $25,000 adjustment. And then I combined the lot size and cul-de-sac here because it is a larger lot and it is on the cul-de-sac. So I just merged those two together for 25,000 as opposed to breaking it out up here. I can't imagine, unless you really are in a very cookie cutter community, I can't imagine that you will ever have a CMA that does not have adjustments to it. That's just being lazy. You need to have adjustments that show why your subject is inferior or superior to its comparables. And this is how you break those down. And then it goes on and it shows some other pretty graphs and all of these things. And then it gives a recommended list price of $976,500 based on the average and the medians and the information and the adjustments that I gave. And that breaks this all down here for you too. So then it has this page that says listing price recommendation, your low, your high, your recommended based on that information. And then it actually has the individual MLS sheets too, which can be hugely helpful, along with your adjustments right at the bottom for why you made some of the things that you made. I'm not a big fan of sending this type of information to a seller in advance. I really want to be sitting with them so I can discuss with them why the adjustments were made the way that they were made and how that ultimately brought forth the value range that it did. I will tell you, despite what this shows, if I were to list my home right now today, I would list it for $949. So even though this shows that it's a little bit higher, again, this is just instinctual based on my knowledge of the market and where things are going. I would try to hit a different price point, and that different price point would be a bit lower than what this is recommending as the price. I'd like to say I will sell my home for $949 because Leah's not messing around when it comes to pricing. I'm not about making a shit ton of adjustments. You come out the gate with the pricing correct the first time and you sell it quickly, and you don't have to deal with all of the nonsense drama that comes with this market.
And
So
Leah,
how did
just
I?
in this, and
Oh
I
yeah,
apologize. So for this example, why would you do it 949?
just because I know that that's going to be a higher trigger point, a more attractive price point for a lot of prospective buyers. And while I made the adjustments, one thing I mentioned I did not account for was market time. So yes, some of these sold more recently, but overall, like I said, the church anomaly one, I don't even know how to account for that. And realistically, that's also throwing some of the numbers off on this. So I'm just looking at it from an overview. While it's not a specific adjustment to a feature, it's just my knowledge of the neighborhood and the area.
Okay, so based upon that, your tactic would be to go a little bit lower, try to get more people looking at the property, more potential list offers and whatnot, and then maybe a bidding war or something like that to drive it up if it does go up.
Yeah, I mean, in all fairness, I don't even know that that 949 price would render a bidding war. It really is just knowing that marketplace really well and what goes and what doesn't and why. And obviously, I've been tracking it for 8 years. This isn't just pigeonholed to these few deals. Um, but the 975 price point, it's not really at a major cutoff either. When you start getting over $500,000, your major cutoff points are in $50,000 increments. And I just think that the 949 would attract more views across the board to result in a 949 sales price.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. I know that some of this is difficult, right? Because I can't tell you how to make your mind operate, and it's a scary thought process, how to make your mind operate the way mine does. I just see things and I try to process them. And there's not specifically a number associated with it. Again, it's just having been invested in the community for so long and understanding those little nuances and what it might take to get it sold. That's, again, a benefit of just really being entrenched and knowledgeable in your designated areas. So how did I get there? For those of you who aren't aware, if you go into your MLS menu and you go to this CMA, you can start new. And then it's just going to ask you for that information that I inputted. But in my case here, this around. I'll tell it the type that I want. You can do a quick or a full CMA. I like the full CMA and includes all those graphs. It makes it look like we're very smart. Then your cover page will have your general information on there, and you can include your generic information on your business card if you have that set up in your MLS account. You're going to confirm the subject details. I haven't really gone into, you can add new items, meaning that anything that's a search feature in the MLS, one of those check boxes or one of those main categories, you can add those here. I've never really found a major need for that. I think, again, just kind of sticking to when was it built, your square footage, your lot size, your core information is good. Because then when you get into your comps, and you can select them. So you can add comparables, then say only show your selected. These were the three that I chose, but I could go in and rerun that if I wanted to. When I get to my adjustments, then this is where I can go ahead and just start telling it, hey, make a new adjustment. So notice this up here, adjustment for comparable. So I'm going to pick which comparable I'm making the adjustment to. So we knew harvest, right? New adjustment, pool. There wasn't one. So it's negative. I'm sorry, it's positive because I'm adjusting mine. $50,000. New adjustment, 3-car garage. I have that. They had the tandem, 2,500. and so on and so forth. So then you could just go ahead. I'm not a big fan of auto adjusting comparables. You can try it. I just haven't found that those to be terribly accurate. So you would go through, you would make all your adjustments, and then you're going to go ahead and click next. And then it comes up with your summary. And then that just breaks it all down for you. I started this because so many of you were reaching out to me and saying, hey, can you really quickly run comps for me? Can you tell based on this class that there's no really quickly running comps? Could I go into CurveView or Monsoon and say, run quick comps for me? Yes, but you can do that. So why would you need me to do that on your behalf? If you are legitimately doing a thorough job on your CMAs, I mean, realistically, guys, some of these would take me an hour and a half to 2 hours plus, depending on how many adjustments were necessary. How, when you start adding in the time to research and look at all of those photos for the different comparable properties and get an idea as to how this is going to compare negatively or positively, it's a time consuming process. So if you're knocking out comps in 15, 20 minutes and it's not a standard cookie cutter, there's literally every lot size is the same, every floor plan is the same, you didn't have a choice in upgrades, there's nothing in those backyards. Anything else realistically should be taking you a hot minute to complete. Questions? Yeah, Jerica, thank you for sharing that because absolutely. I don't want to just, and this is why I said I'm hesitant to ever send over a CMA or potential value in advance. I want to sit down with you as a prospective seller and I want to work you through these numbers exactly like we just did because I want to explain where that came from. I don't just, again, I don't want to word vomit all over you. I just want to break it down so you see, hey, I ran all of the math. This is what this is worth in this community. This is what this is worth. Based on those adjustments, here is the value. It's very hard to argue against math. So, like, it's black and white. Here's where it is. Now, if they're smart enough, they might be able to argue against some of your subjective analyses and some of those adjustments accordingly. But typically speaking, like, no, this is what a pool is worth in this neighborhood. This is what a bathroom is worth in this neighborhood. And if you show that, they're more likely to get on board with your pricing. If you just show up and you just start talking or asking them what they want to sell it for, and you don't actually provide the numbers, I think you're doing both them and yourself a disservice. Alrighty, guys. So tomorrow you are going to be sitting in with me to start, but then I have Melissa Lewis from Rock Title. She is going to go over some quick overview reminder things about what to look for on preliminary title commitments, as well as how to read the closing disclosure and the settlement statement. So that way you know the numbers that you're verifying when it comes time for closing. So please do join us tomorrow at 9. I will send out this recap so you have all of that information as soon as it's available and I will let you go.
Thank you. This was helpful.
My pleasure. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Leah.